Have you ever lain next to him after everything, after opening your heart, your body, your soul, only to feel him slowly drift away? Not just physically, but emotionally. The shift is subtle at first. His texts feel colder, his presence fades, and suddenly you're left alone with a haunting question. Was I just used? Did I give too much? Was it ever real? You're not crazy, you're not broken, and most importantly, you're not alone. What if the reason he pulls away after intimacy isn't about your worth, but about his wounds? What if his silence isn't rejection, but reflection? And what if no one ever told you the truth because they didn't know it either? This space is safe. Here, you will find clarity without shame, truth without blame, and healing that empowers you, not to chase, but to reclaim your peace. Because you deserve answers, you deserve wholeness, and it starts now. Have you ever been with someone who seemed so present, so connected, only to go emotionally cold right after being intimate? You're left confused, maybe even ashamed, wondering, did I do something wrong? Was I only wanted for one thing? The shift is so sudden, it feels like emotional whiplash. And it hurts, not just because of the silence, but because of what that silence seems to say about your worth. But let's pause for a moment, because what no one tells you is this. What you're feeling isn't rejection, it's reflection. For a man who has never felt safe expressing emotion, true intimacy can feel like exposure. Not just physical, but emotional. Vulnerability, being seen, and that kind of closeness, it doesn't feel comforting, it feels terrifying. Psychologically, many emotionally unavailable men carry unhealed beliefs. That emotions make them weak, that being soft makes them unsafe. So when you open yourself fully, mind, body, heart, it creates a depth that triggers something in him. Instead of leaning in, he retreats. Not because you were too much, but because he wasn't ready to meet you there. It's important you don't blame yourself for that. You didn't cause his fear, you simply revealed it. Your presence awakened a part of him he hasn't yet accepted in himself. The part that longs for connection, but is terrified of surrendering control to feel it. In his world, closeness feels like a trap, not a gift. So he distances to protect himself from a depth he hasn't learnt to hold. And you, being open and emotionally available, become a mirror, not of danger, but of truth. A truth he wasn't prepared to face. This doesn't mean you're unworthy of love. In fact, it means the opposite. You offered love in its most vulnerable form, and it was his limitations, not your light, that made him run. So here's your clarity. His pulling away doesn't require you to chase, fix, or explain. It requires you to see clearly. To understand that sometimes the deepest kind of strength is in the stillness of not internalizing someone else's avoidance. You are not here to dim your love to make someone comfortable in their fear. You are here to be met fully in body, mind, and soul. And the one who is ready for real intimacy won't disappear when things get real. He'll stay, because he'll recognize what you carry, not just desire, but depth, and that is never too much. Have you ever felt deeply connected with someone during intimacy, only to feel invisible afterward? One day, he's leaning in, charming, attentive, present, then suddenly, he shifts. The calls slow down. The messages lose warmth. The emotional closeness disappears, and you're left wondering, was it real? Did I mean anything to him at all? The pain of being emotionally dropped after intimacy is more than just rejection. It's a shock to the heart. But there's something important you need to know. You didn't misread the connection, you just misjudged what it meant to him. For some men, intimacy isn't about emotional closeness, it's about ego. The pursuit of desire becomes a way to feel powerful, validated, desired. And once that need is met, once his ego feels satisfied, the emotional momentum stops. not because you weren't enough, but because his heart was never truly open to begin with. This doesn't mean he was acting maliciously. In many cases, even he doesn't fully understand the difference between real connection and ego validation. But when someone isn't emotionally available, they chase attention, not depth. They pursue the feeling of being wanted, but once they have it, they retreat. Not because you failed, but because they reached what they were actually looking for: reassurance, not relationship. It's hard not to internalize this. You start replaying every moment, every word, trying to figure out where you went wrong. But you didn't go wrong. You went real. You showed up with emotion, with truth, with softness. And he simply didn't have the capacity or the courage to meet you there. Understanding this is freedom. You don't have to chase clarity from someone who was never committed to offering it. You don't need to shrink your heart to protect someone else's emotional immaturity. And you certainly don't have to question your worth because someone else confused chemistry with connection. Let his distance be your redirection, not toward more effort, but toward more self-respect. The man who values real intimacy won't vanish when your soul shows up. He won't pull away after sex, he'll lean in, because to him, closeness won't feel like a trap, it will feel like home. So take this moment not as proof that you weren't enough, but as evidence that you're finally seeing what you are: a woman who deserves more than ego-driven attention. You deserve presence. You deserve depth. And that begins when you stop accepting less. Have you ever been close to someone, truly close, where the connection felt raw, deep, undeniable, and yet right after, he vanished? It's a familiar pattern. He's present, affectionate, even vulnerable in moments, but as soon as it becomes real, emotionally or physically, he shifts. He grows cold, distant, and unclear. You begin to wonder, was it something I did? Did I open up too fast? Was I too much? But what's happening here isn't about you being too much. It's about how he experiences closeness. For some men, intimacy equals exposure, and exposure feels unsafe. When a man has unresolved emotional wounds, trauma, or deep-rooted fears around connection, he may unconsciously link desire with danger. The more connected he feels, the more vulnerable he becomes. And instead of embracing that vulnerability, he panics. Because closeness means being seen, and being seen means possibly being heard. This fear doesn't always look dramatic. Often, it shows up as emotional detachment, ghosting, mixed signals, sudden silence. These are his defenses, his attempts to regain control in a situation that's bringing up feelings he doesn't know how to handle. You may think, but he looks so connected, so honest, so into it, and he may have been. But that moment of intimacy brought him to an edge he's never allowed himself to cross. So instead of growing closer, he pulls away. It's not rejection of you, it's self-preservation for him. That doesn't make it okay, but it makes it understandable. Understanding this helps you shift from blame to clarity, from chasing answers to protecting your peace. You didn't scare him off with your love. You simply touched a part of him he hasn't healed. And that's not your responsibility to fix. This is your moment to see clearly. When someone associates love with loss, intimacy with pain, or connection with danger, they cannot hold your heart safely. They will run from what others would treasure, and chasing them only deepens your own wound of feeling unseen. So what's the path forward? It's not about shrinking your love or holding back your warmth. It's about standing in it with discernment. It's about choosing not to abandon yourself in the name of keeping someone else close. The man who is ready for real intimacy won't flinch when you get close. He'll breathe deeper, he'll stay, he'll create safety, not confusion. Until then, stay with you. Because your ability to love deeply isn't the problem, it's your superpower. And it's waiting to be met by someone who sees it and stays. Have you ever felt the emotional shift after intimacy, where things were supposed to get closer, but instead he became distant, vague, or emotionally unavailable? You may have blamed yourself. Maybe you thought you got too attached. Maybe you assumed you were too much too soon. But the truth is, what you're really feeling is someone running from the weight of emotional accountability, not from your love. For some men, intimacy creates the illusion of commitment, not because they intend to deceive, but because the moment itself feels real. They're fully present in the passion, the attention, the energy of closeness. But once that moment passes, reality settles in. And with it comes expectation, responsibility, consistency, and emotional presence. To a man who isn't emotionally mature or available, these things can feel like pressure. Suddenly he knows that after being close, you're going to need more, not just time or words, but truth, care, and effort. And if he hasn't built the emotional tools to handle that, he won't rise to meet it. He'll retreat from it. And when he does, you're left with confusion. You may try to explain, text more, seek clarity, believing the more open and understanding you are, the more likely he is to come back and meet you where you are. But all that does is shift you into his emotional role while he avoids the very thing that could grow him. Here's what you need to hear. His avoidance is not about your worth. It's about his unwillingness to carry the emotional weight of what connection actually means. Psychologically, this is often rooted in ego defense mechanisms. He may crave closeness, but only when it doesn't require consistency. He may enjoy the idea of connection, but panic when it threatens his emotional freedom. You are not here to carry both hearts in a relationship. You are not here to keep explaining yourself to someone who fears showing up with depth. Let his silence be the answer. Let his avoidance be your clarity. You don't need to chase someone who is running from himself. You need to stand with the version of you that refuses to confuse silence with love. The one who is meant for you won't run when intimacy invites them deeper. They will meet you there, not with empty promises, but with presence, not with performance, but with consistency. That is what you deserve. And no, you're not asking for too much. You're asking the right question. Who's ready to stay when love begins? Have you ever been left in silence after giving your heart, your body, and your trust, only to feel like it meant everything to you and nothing to him? And that emptiness is more than confusion, it's grief. The grief of believing something meaningful was shared and then suddenly being left alone to question if any of it was real. You find yourself stuck in your head, asking, did I read it wrong? Did I move too fast? Was I ever enough? But what if the answer isn't about being too much or not enough? What if his pulling away has nothing to do with your value and everything to do with what your presence reflects? Here's a quiet truth. His withdrawal is not a measure of your worth. It's a mirror showing his emotional limitations. When a woman shows up with depth, offering softness, vulnerability, emotional openness, she shines a light on areas of the masculine heart that have long been locked away. And for a man who hasn't done the inner work to face his own emotional fears, that light doesn't feel safe, it feels threatening. This isn't your failure, it's his unpreparedness. Psychologically, many men who retreat after intimacy are acting from deep-rooted fear, fear of dependence, fear of being needed, fear of being exposed. Ego tells them it's safer to remain distant than to risk surrendering to something real. So they pull away, not because the connection was shallow, but because it was too real, too revealing, too confronting. And in their absence, you're left with a powerful, painful choice. Chase the version of him that felt good in the moment, or stay grounded in the version of you that still believes in love without abandoning yourself. This is where your healing begins. You don't need to earn someone's presence after giving them your truth. You don't need to convince someone to stay who can't even stay with themselves. And you certainly don't need to carry the emotional burden of someone who only wanted the beauty of you without the responsibility of seeing you. Let his silence be a signal, not a sentence. You are not broken. You are not a mistake. You are a woman who brought her full self to the table, and that is power, not weakness, not desperation. Shower. The right heart will not pull away when it sees you. It will rise. And until then, may you keep choosing the version of you who no longer runs after those who are still hiding from themselves.